Now, let's bring in Conservative Member of Parliament, Gillian, who represents Chichester. So kind of you to join us. Britain, as we know now, is leaving the EU on the 31st of January as part of a transition deal. That's in no way saying that Brexit is over. That's really the beginning, surely, of another process, the negotiations towards a trade deal and a future negotiation. So why is the Brexit department being abolished? And why is the term Brexit being phased out?
Well, it is actually a very important step. It's not to be underestimated. If you think of back the Parliament that we had, the last Parliament, the vast majority of the discussion was actually about rerunning the referendum. So once we actually pass this withdrawal bill, that will be gone. So we will definitely be leaving. And then, of course, we will have left all the institutions. And then, of course, we have a year to put in place a new agreement. A lot of this groundwork has been done already. So for 3.5 years, civil servants have been working, thousands of them across the Channel and here, have been working on putting in place, the bare bones and the principles, I guess, of a trade deal, which is why we think it's very possible to do within the year. So a lot of that work has already been done, so it's just going to be basically to get that put into an agreement so that we can all sign up to it.
Right, and of course, the process still carries on. I just want to look back at your manifesto. Page 7 of the manifesto, we've introduced and consistently raised the national living wage and will raise it still further. Page 60 of the government briefing document accompanying today's Queen's speech, the Chancellor's pledge that the national living wage will increase, provided that economic conditions allow. That's quite a qualification, which is not what voters who read the manifesto, that page, were expecting.
Well, we've already increased, and we've already actually put in previously in previous budgets a plan of continual increase of the minimum wage, and that will go up to, I think it's £10.50 by the period 23-24. So that's already there as an expectation. I mean, clearly, I think any time, that's why you have a budget every year after the Queen's speech and a review of the budget as well mid-term, to make sure that you can afford as a country all the things that you pledge. Of course, that is the case. But I have no doubt that the minimum wage will be going up, and I have no doubt that our economy will continue to thrive as we leave the European Union. And, if you look at what happened after this election, a lot of investment that had been pent up, that had been waiting to be made in the country was starting to be made. It kind of released this pressure valve that we've had. So I'm very confident of that. But of course, nobody can predict the future when you're looking forward 4 and 5 years, or 3 and 4 years even. So that's just prudent, to put it that way. But I have no doubt that we'll be increasing the minimum wage, as I've no doubt we'll also be increasing the national insurance threshold.
Nobody can predict the future, particularly when it comes to economic cycles and what's going to happen with the economy, and especially as there is now still some concern since the election and since some of the comments by Mr. Johnson, that actually the prospect of a no deal at all between the EU and the United Kingdom could be back on the table if there isn't a trade agreement hammered out by the course of this year. And that wouldn't help the British economy. Of
course it wouldn't. And I have, I've no doubt that there is going to be a trade deal. Why? Because it is 100% in the interests of us and the other 27 countries across Europe, and because a lot of the groundwork is already laid. The people who have talked up no deal in this whole discussion have been people who wanted a second referendum, and they have done it as though it was the outcome of Brexit to try and scare everybody into wanting a second referendum. And that's where you hear nobody voted.
That's not entirely fair. There have been people in the Conservative Party as well who've talked up the prospect of a no deal.
Well, I think before Boris Johnson got his deal, because there was such tight timeframes, it was a legitimate concern. And I know some people did have that concern. But actually, when he got that deal, which nobody thought he would get, when he went off and he got that deal, at that point, in my view, no deal is literally, the chance of it is very, very small indeed.
OK, Gillian Keegan, thank you very much for joining us.